families who have questions are DMing me and saying, look, I would love if you did a podcast about this. And so this episode is a direct response to a father who reached out to me and said, I would love if you did a podcast on how to get the most out of your agent at every step of a player's career. So this episode is going to be dedicated to that.
An agent needs to be a fiduciary. We need to be doing what's best for the player, meeting their needs, regardless of what's best for us. If I'm your agent and I'm telling you, no, we have better opportunities elsewhere, just do what I say, but that's not what you want, well, who am I looking out for? I'm looking out for myself.
The reality is all of these agents are in this business because they want to help players. I do believe that. Now, where they take it from there is totally different. So I think it's only appropriate that we start off this podcast by letting everybody know the difficulty we had coming to the podcast. We represent the Friday Night Guy at Stanford, and we were driving from Clemson, and Brian decided to speed, and we ended up getting pulled over. So thankfully, we're here on time. This episode is a direct response to a father who reached out to me and said, I would love if you did a podcast on how to get the most out of your agent at every step of a player's career. So this episode is going to be dedicated to that. And I felt like a perfect guest that we could have on that would help us kind of walk through that is you. So you're obviously my brother, but in addition, you've been an agent for almost 15 years. You ended up going to school at Arizona State. And I want to kind of start this thing off by talking about your experience in baseball, talking about you going from high school and then choosing Arizona State. And so why don't, if you could, I guess, just give us a little intro as far as when was this? How was that experience just from the jump?
Yeah, so after high school baseball for me, I didn't have a ton of opportunity in terms of next steps in my playing career. I had opportunities to play at junior colleges. I had opportunities to maybe play at some Division II schools. But like most of the kids that we deal with now, I wanted to go and have that big college experience at the big university. And so that led me to Arizona State.
So let me pause you real fast. So when you were in high school, you did have opportunities to go to certain places, like a lot of kids do, right?
Yep.
And here you are kind of being torn between, do I go to a junior college and play baseball, which obviously is the choice that I made, or do I go to, a big school? And to give everybody a perspective, when you decided to go to Arizona State, that's essentially like going to Tennessee today or LSU today. And I don't want to belittle Arizona State today because it's still a really good program, but they were kind of that predominant power every single year.
Yeah, the year before I showed up, they had Mike Leake and Ike Davis and
first
Brett Wallace.
First rounder. Exactly.
Yeah, long list of guys who ended up having great, professional careers, making it to the big leagues, and in Mike Leake's case, having a very, very long career. But yeah, so I wanted to have this big college experience, and I wanted to go to the football games and be a part of the community and have this, be proud of where I wanted to be proud of where I went to, right? Which I think a lot of kids go through now. So I was under the impression that I could show up to Arizona State and just will myself onto the baseball team. So I had an opportunity. I had an opportunity to work out with the team. I had an opportunity to walk on. Very quickly in the fall, Mike Rooney, who's now he's a writer for D1 Baseball. He was the director of baseball ops. Pulls me to the side and is like, "Hey kid, this isn't for you. We're not going to have an opportunity for you here, but we love everything that you're doing. We love everything that you're about. We'd love to keep you on as a student manager." So at the time, no player ever wants to hear that their career is over. But being that you're my brother, I was hyper aware of how difficult it is to be a professional. And I realized, hey, I probably don't have the talent to do that.
Right.
So it was a little bit easier for me to be like, okay, now is my time. Everybody gets told at some point it's over and this is my time. And so what does the next step look like for me?
What year is this?
So this would have been 2009.
Right. So 2009. So I got into the business in 2001. So you're seeing firsthand like, oh yeah, because I remember like, I'm bringing you around the players. You're experiencing kind of what it's like to be around these guys and how they operate at the highest level. So you're taking all this information in and you're understanding like, all right, wait a second. I did too, by the way, like I kind of see the writing on the wall. I feel like I probably can't make this a career. I think it's actually a testament to you that Rooney brought you aside and said, I like what you're doing. And so when he said, I want to introduce you to this concept of being a student manager, is it fair to describe that role? Because I think a lot of people hear that and they don't really know what that means. Tell everybody about that role and like really what that entailed.
So my role while I was there was an aspect of it where I was on the field helping run practices and doing things on that side of things. But then most of my job was actually away from the field, taking care of all the things that players would need off the field.
Right, the business side.
Yeah, exactly. I was involved very heavily with like all the equipment for the players. So, talking to Evo Shield about what these players need, what the deal should look like for the university. We were a huge Wilson school, DeMarini school, one of the first. And so dealing with that, I was the relationship guy with Wilson. I was making sure that the players had, placing the orders and managing that relationship. And then, also I dealt with all the alumni and like all that. So I saw all the inner workings behind the scenes while also still having this on-field presence and seeing how great these players really were and what it took them every day. So it was an interesting perspective to see kind of both sides of the coin.
So you start out, obviously, as you described, the student manager. Tell us about the experience, because again, this is the number one school in the country. What happened when you were there? What did you see? I guess.
Yeah, when I was there, very quickly after me, all right, I'm going to be the student manager. I'm going to accept this role. The head coach of the school gets fired. And that's Pat Murphy, who's now the manager of the Milwaukee Brewers.
Right. Manager of the year last year. Like this is a guy who is known widely throughout baseball as a very good manager.
Yeah. And this was really, and we talked about this earlier, like this was my first kind of witnessing what greatness looked like. So Cole Calhoun was one of the players on the team who had a very long MLB career. He, the year before, was a junior, doesn't get drafted after having a really good season, comes back for his senior year. So he's like, trying to prove the world wrong. And watching him and other players kind of take this, there was a void that was created from Pat Murphy, who was the leader of this team, no longer being with the team. And watching them fill this void and rally around each other was like, blew me away. Right. And for me, being able to witness that now since that, I've been able to be around a ton of great players who have had a lot of success, Albert Pujols and Manny Machado and Austin Riley. But that was my first time kind of seeing it firsthand. And it was really special.
What did he do? Because I want this is actually a segue into maybe some interesting conversations, but what was it that Cole did? I've been fortunate. I met Cole. I played golf with him at Albert Pujols' charity event years ago. And it struck me as obviously great human being, but you can definitely see like a really powerful personality and certainly a confident guy who I could see being a leader. What did he do exactly?
I think just the like unrelenting commitment and conviction in we have this goal, nothing changes, and being like hyper focused on the task at hand. That to me like really stood out as like, okay, these guys are different. And it made me feel better about, okay, yeah, I probably didn't belong on the field with these guys because they're just at a whole nother level.
Right.
Yeah.
So Cole Calhoun, funny story for everybody. We represent a player, obviously, who's no longer with this organization, but they played together in the big leagues for the Texas Rangers. And Cole Calhoun pulls him aside one day. And this guy's, he's a very nice guy, our client. And Cole goes, hey man, I want you to punch me in the face. You know who I'm talking about, obviously.
Yeah.
And then our client says, what? I'm not going to punch you in the face. He goes, I need you to punch me in the face. So it really, right. It's like he has this ability to pull it out of you. Okay, so you're at Arizona State. You're seeing this happen. You guys end up going to the College World Series.
Yeah, so we were the number one seed going into the College World Series.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how was that experience?
I mean, incredible. That's where, for me, now all the work from my perspective was done. So it was really just like I was there to be a fan. We ended up not performing very well, lost 2 games and we're out of there. But to see like the baseball community kind of rally around that event and, it was, and at the time it was at Rosenblatt Stadium, which very historic. So yeah, it was an incredible experience. Wish it would have gone better for us, but I think that team was destined to get there, and they really just, they willed themselves there.
What did you, I think this is important for parents to understand. A lot of people that we talk to just in the industry, right? There are a lot of players. They experience college as a player. They go to pro ball. They experience pro ball as a player. They have an agent. They experience what the agent's like as a player. What I want to talk to you about is you experienced college as a business, right? You were thrust into this environment. And so you are kind of seeing behind the curtain at the business of college athletics. What was that like? And what would you say to families who maybe don't think that that's what it is?
Yeah, so I was introduced to this idea of baseball as a business very, very early because of you. You would come home for Christmas or whatever it was. And for everyone who doesn't know, we're 10 years apart. So I always I was looking up to you and watching you just manage these players' lives. I was like hyper aware of like, okay, what goes on behind the scenes? And so, yeah, when I showed up to college and now this was my thing, it was kind of seamless for me, right? This is like, okay, this is
just what it is.
This is what it is. So repeat your question again, I guess.
What would you tell these families who maybe see college as not a business? It's like, no, this is just a sport.
Yeah, no, it's very much a business. And, when I was in college, there was more of this player development aspect of college baseball, where now, because of, the current trends with NIL and with the transfer portal, this like win now mentality, and like if we don't win, these coaches are maybe thinking, hey, are we going to lose our job? Like that aspect of the business has been just like taken to a whole nother level. So I can only imagine what it's like to be behind the scenes in a college program now.
And I think just so everybody kind of gets it, these college coaches have a hard job, right? Every college coach I've ever met is an absolute bulldog and is dying to win. And not just because they want to keep their job, right? They want to win because why else are we playing this game, right? I would say that is 100 for 100, right? 100% of the time, that is what's going on. I would be shocked to learn coach is willing to devote that much time only because, it's his paycheck. But the way the game has changed today with the NIL is it gives these programs just another thing to have to balance. So there's really two main changes in college baseball recently. There's actually three, but I want to talk about two. One is the transfer portal. So there's that whole element that they now have to kind of analyze and evaluate. And then the second is obviously NIL. And both of those things are connected now, but those are really two big aspects. And so these college coaches have to navigate this and think about it. I think about it from their perspective. If you're a player that I'm recruiting and I'm a college coach, if I'm recruiting you, I have to believe that I want you in my program for the next 4 years. I understand you may get drafted, so maybe it's only 3, or if you're 19, maybe it's going to be only 2. But the reason I want you is because I think that you can stay with me for 4 years, depending on how things go and how you develop. I think one of the things that's happening though is now these coaches with the transfer portal, it's like free agency, right? I mean, these players are coming in, and if it's a smaller program, they're going to go to that program. And most of the time, they're going to play every day. They're going to showcase themselves. And now, wait a minute, I'm going to open things up. I'm going to go to maybe a bigger school, potentially for the development piece, potentially for the NIL piece, right? So these coaches are having to navigate all this stuff, all the while still trying to win. And so I think it is important that we touch on that, because the game that I grew up playing and in college wasn't like that at all. I mean, I went to a junior college, so I was there for 2 years. And when I was going to choose the school that I wanted to, kind of finish my career at, for me, there was never a thought of like, oh yeah, it's one and done. Even though there's a lot of kids that do think about that. Where today it's, not only that, you can go to a junior college and your clock doesn't even start. So we are in a completely different landscape. So all to say, there is a lot that these coaches have to deal with. And so naturally, when you start injecting all these different things, it's very easy that the business takes over. And now it's really just a matter of making business decisions, not kind of decisions that affect a player.
Yeah, I think the expectations have kind of been heightened now, where before the expectation was, yeah, you want to get to Omaha every year. You realistically realize that's not going to happen. So if we like put together some good seasons, there's an acknowledgement that like, hey, there's a little bit of a rebuilding process. We're going to have some younger guys come in. We're going to develop them. And eventually we'll be able to turn this around. I think now where college coaches, and I do not envy their job because of this, it's like how Kentucky basketball was 10 years ago, right? Where it's like every year there was a new crop of players that came in.
Everyone leaves it after their freshman year.
And they're expected to go to the Final Four. And if they don't, it's a huge disappointment, right? That's what I think college coaches are going through now. And so I feel for them because it's not the same as it was before.
No, and it makes you wonder, like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Like, what came first? Them wanting to win and bringing in the best talent, or guys wanting to transfer out. And then it just becomes this cyclical thing where it's, hey man, the cream's going to rise to the top. If you're cut out for it, you're going to stay. If not, you got to go. I got to bring in somebody else. So all to say, kids today out of high school, when they're choosing the college to go to, as much as you want to make the decision by thinking it's going to be for the next 3 or 4 years, the reality is it's kind of a year-to-year thing. God willing, you like the experience and you want to stay, but it may not turn out that way. You have to prepare that coach may bring other guys in to compete with you if you do not play as a freshman, and you better be prepared and ready. And I ultimately think college definitely prepares guys for the next level. I know there's like this debate out there where when you're being scouted as a high school kid and you have the opportunity to sign out of high school, there's people in the corner that say you need to go to pro ball. That's just the answer. That's the path that's going to be most beneficial. There's other people that say, no, it's got to be college. The truth of the matter is it's not cookie cutter. It's not, this is the way, that's not. It's based on a lot of different factors. But if you just talk about it from a development standpoint, what a player who chooses to go to college gets is they get an opportunity to mature, right? To grow up. It's almost like a little bit of a more controlled environment than they would ultimately have in professional baseball. In professional baseball, as you know, Brian, like, you get into pro ball and there's the expectation that like you signed a professional contract, you are a professional, make sure you do the work. Where in college, it's much more hands-on. You don't have the option not to show up. Like in pro ball, if you got to be there at 7 a.m. and you don't show up that day and you show up at noon, yeah, they could release you, right? They could reprimand you, but there's no like, punishment to the extent where like, hey, we're going to take something from you unless they release you. In college, oh yeah, I mean, you're not going to play for, 2 weeks. There's different things that they can do. And it definitely feels more like mom and dad coming down on you than in professional baseball. That experience is different for every player. Some players don't need it because they had it in high school by their parents. Some players have never had that and they actually could benefit from it. So, I mean, not to say that this is what this episode is about, but I would encourage everybody, every parent, as they're going through this to really think about that, because I do believe that it's important. And if you're a parent and you're not thinking about this stuff before your kid goes to college or decides to sign, you're already behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, I think one thing I want to add to that I think is, from my viewpoint, one of the huge benefits that college players have over high school players when it comes to professional baseball. Going to college, because there's a limited number of spots for playing opportunity, creates this immediate sense of urgency, right? If you show up to a college campus, the only way that you're playing is you earn a job, right? Not to say that that's not entirely the case in pro ball, but if you sign for some money out of high school, in pro ball, you're going to get the opportunity.
Yeah.
If you're struggling, it's going to be okay. They're going to keep running you out there, which for some guys, that's what they need. And when you go to college, you have to figure out a way to perform now. And I think that from the mental aspect and having that sense of urgency to like, oh, I got to go now or else I'm going to be forgotten about from day one, long-term benefits college players, Well,
and I will say this too. I believe personally, and there could be some outliers here, so I don't want to say there's never been a guy that this, hasn't happened to, but I believe if you are capable of being a professional player, right? Whether big leaguer, minor leaguer, whatever, there's no world that you're going to college and college ruins that for you. I believe, are there going to be hurdles that you're going to face in college that may make the journey different and difficult? Sure. But I believe that if you have what it takes to be a professional, you will find your way through the experience, even if that means you went to a college and you didn't play as a freshman and now you have to transfer out and go somewhere else. That guy who's capable of being a professional, who really wants it, will figure out a way. And if he doesn't figure out a way, then I don't believe he was ever going to make it in pro ball, if that makes sense. Like, and that's where when high school parents right now, when your son is being scouted and the scouts videoing your son, interact with teammates in the dugout or walking to class or whatever it is, these are some of the things that they're wanting to see. They want to know, like, what's under the hood. Does he really want it? Right? As an example, if you're a kid, let's just say, who's got his heart set on going to college out of high school, and the reason you have your heart set on that is you really want your degree, education is important. Maybe you wouldn't sign for just a little money. You actually think it's going to take a lot more than that. And you don't think, based on what you've done, it's going to warrant a big signing bonus. But if teams are sending you questionnaires and they're sending you, or they're texting you, or they're calling you and they're wanting to interact with you, my personal opinion is you're doing yourself a disservice in the long run if you just completely ignore those things. If you don't answer the questionnaires, if you don't interact with the scouts. If I'm a scout, I'm taking that to say, well, do you not want to play professional baseball? And I know how crazy that may sound, because what are you talking about? Every kid wants to play professional baseball. Well, how else do I take, if this is your dream and you're a high school kid and you're ignoring a scout, it tells me, the scout, there's something else going on, right? I understand you want to go to college, but don't you understand that I'm still going to be the scout that's going to be here scouting you out of college? Don't you want to at least interact with me and get to know me? And so I think parents need to be aware of that through this journey. It's a lot of it gets solved through like common sense. But yeah, I do believe that is an important component that a lot of these families need to understand. So how does the journey end for you in college? What happens?
So after my junior year, I start interning with an agency that you happen to work at, a large agency. And then following graduation, I got hired full time by that agency. Started out, doing what a lot of, I think, agents start out doing in the business, which is, I took care of players' equipment, or I did some concierge. I was kind of like the day-to-day point person for all of our clients, right? And being that I was...
Right, you're learning the business, you're building relationships, you know what I think, and I'm thinking about this right now, like I think one of the biggest benefits of the role that you and a lot of people have, I had it when I got into the business. What it teaches you is what the expectation is of the players that you're serving, right? When you enter an agency and you are hands-on doing work while in college with Mike Piazza, who, by the way, is an all-star every year, who's a future Hall of Famer, who's all these different things. There's an expectation that a guy like Mike Piazza has for the business in his life. So you have to live up to that expectation. You have to figure out what they want. And so that's where I feel like when you were coming into the business, like you were essentially learning. Would you agree with that?
For sure. And I think it was more just an extension of what I was already doing, right? So what I was doing at ASU, a lot of the same actual work, day to day, making sure that the players have everything that they need, taking care of everything off the field for them so they can focus on what's happening on the field. That was a lot of what I was doing immediately when I started in this business, except I was doing it because we were at a larger agency for a large number of players, right? That was the big difference.
Yeah. What I would love to kind of get into now is, and there's like two sides to this conversation. So one of the things that we like to do is obviously educate these families. I mean, it's the point of this podcast. However, as we meet with families and interact with these families, some information that I do think is valuable is really giving these families a taste of, look, the conversations that you're going to have, if you have an agent already, with your agent, or if you're meeting with agents that you're meeting with, is really trying to discern and figure out what makes everybody unique, what makes everybody different, what are the questions that I should ask, what are the things that I should be aware of. Oftentimes what we do is we give these families a series of questions that they should ask, not only us, but other agents as well, right? And I think in the spirit of really, again, the point of this episode is how do you get the most out of your agent at every step of your career? I want to kind of talk about the different characters in that, because one is the role that the parent or player plays. And then the other role is what's the role that the agent plays, right? So as we think about the role that the player or the parent plays, the first thing that comes to mind is obviously communication is a two-way street, meaning it is not just on, and this is not to say the responsibility doesn't fall on the agent, because I believe it does. I believe that, the right agent is being led with the right intentions, but also has the ability to communicate in a way that is bringing this parent or this player along, helping educate them in a way that this family can understand and digest. But let's talk a little bit about what is the role that the player plays in that relationship.
Yeah, so I think where the player fits in when it comes to the communication is showing that you're taking an interest in your career, I think is important, right? Having open and honest dialogue with your agent is important. They're taking care of your career, right? If something is affecting you or something you don't understand it, and you're not at least letting them know when they're explaining it to you, you're going to have some issues, right? Now your career is not really in your hands, right? It's just, I'm just following the lead of my agent. I'm not giving any feedback. So like there is some give and take there where your agent needs to be able to get down to your level, explain it in a way that you can understand it and you can digest it. But you also need to have a comfort with your agent where you can ask questions when necessary. If something isn't really sinking in for you, slow things down and like make sure that you understand, because like Tony Clark said on your podcast, educated players make educated decisions.
Right.
Right.
I think the foundation for the whole thing is really just the relationship. I don't think it's everything, but it's the foundation for it. If there's no relationship built up with the client, or if there's no relationship built up from the player's perspective with the agent, there's naturally going to be a lack of trust, like an uncertainty as far as like, are their intentions what I want them to be? And so I think for every parent or player who's listening to this, who's meeting with agents for the first time, really think about who is the person that, number one, I'm going to be communicating with on a daily basis, right? Is this person the one that's going to be negotiating my contract, or is that somebody else, right? And again, not to say there has to be this answer or that answer. I'm not here to tell you what the answer needs to be. I'm here to tell you like these are the questions to ask. The reason that is important is because if you're building a relationship with one particular individual, this individual is the one who's getting to know you. He's the one that knows what you want. He's the one who is invested in the relationship. But the other guy over there behind the scenes who is negotiating the contract, who may be good at that, doesn't know these hot button issues that you care about. That is a problem. It is.
Yeah, it's really an awareness thing, right? If you decide to go with an agent and you have an understanding that the relationship is, hey, I deal with this person, and then when I get to a different point in my career, I deal with someone else, and then when I get to a different point in career, I deal with someone else. If you're aware of that and you sign up for it, that's great. But it's when there's an unawareness there,
right?
And you're not asking the right questions to get those answers, and it's, oh, I didn't know this is how the relationship was going to go. That's where it's a problem.
And where I want to challenge players and parents is, don't fall into the trap of, well, it's right for this guy, so it should be right for me, right? Really think about what is the relationship that I want to have with my agent? Do I think it's valuable for this person to really know what I want to accomplish? Or would I rather just have them tell me what I should do? I just want to play baseball. I don't want to worry about the other stuff, which by the way, that's what they choose. That's fine too. The problem and where I would push back is then at that point, you have to accept if your agent makes a decision for you and doesn't tell you and you find out secondhand and it's not what you would have wanted, you have created this environment where this is the expectation, right? If you didn't let him know that that is not okay for you, he needs to let you know in advance. Like I would think personally that the agent should reach out and intentionally involve the player anyways. But there's a lot of agents that don't. And the defense is, well, what do you mean, man? Like this has been going on for 5 years and you've never wanted to know before. So why would I think you want to know now? Right? This is why it's so important to be involved in that. And so obviously number one on this is communication, right? The second one, which you kind of touched on too, is taking an interest. So let's talk about like, why does that matter? Why do players need to take an interest in their career?
Well, so when you're thinking about the complexities of the business of baseball, there's a lot that's going on behind the scenes. I would think a player, in order to put yourself in the best position to succeed, you have to have an understanding. That's at least our belief. That you need to know what's going on behind the scenes so you can best approach your career and know, how to maximize everything that's in front of you, right?
Well, yeah. And so taking an interest can look like a lot of different things. You could be a player who just got drafted and you're in low A and the hitting coach at the low A level is telling you to work on something specifically. The hitting coordinator comes in and tells you something totally different, right? If you're not taking an interest in your career, then maybe you're just assuming, well, this is just how it is. This stinks. I don't know what to do. But the reality of that situation is, well, no, like we got to get everybody on the same page. That may look like, your agent having a conversation with the farm director, the GM, the assistant GM, depending on the player. But the team ultimately, what the player needs to understand is the team most likely doesn't really know that this is going on because it wouldn't make sense that they would want two different people saying opposing things to the player. Like that's common sense. And so for a player to take an interest, it means, wait a second, I need to call this out. I understand this may make me uncomfortable, but this is my career. I'm not okay if this, if I'm listening to both of these people, I may not have a good season now, and that has now set me back. So I need to take a moment, figure out what I want to do. And a lot of times that looks like having a conversation with your agent. And if he's the right one, he's not telling you, don't worry about it. It's fine. This will play itself out. He's saying, wait a second, there's strategy involved with how we need to handle this conversation. And then there's strategy involved with, well, who's the one that has the conversation, right? Because there are instances and times where it's more appropriate for the player, let's just say, to have a conversation with the coach. There are other times where I would discourage that and say, this is above that. I don't want you to put yourself in a position to say something maybe that's untoward. I'd rather have the conversation with the front office official. And look, I'm not going to say that you're complaining to me about this, but this is you telling me this is an issue. And I, as your agent, need to rectify this, right? That is taking an interest in your career.
Yeah. I think it's not the agent's job, or I shouldn't say that. It's not the player's job to make sure that the agent is taking an interest in their career, obviously. But if the player's not taking an interest in their own career, what message does that send your agent? And again, like this podcast, how to get the most out of your agent. Right? This isn't just like how to have an agent. Mm-hmm. This is how do you maximize this relationship and making sure that they're aware of how bad you want it and like how interested you are in all these things is going to heighten the work that they do for you. There's no doubt.
Well, and so the topic and the reason why I think it's also valuable is I had an executive coach a few years ago. He said to me, he's like, hey, Matt, I want to teach you how to get the most out of me because I was having a difficult time. I was being coached by this guy and I was showing up as like I was taking a class, like teach me today something. Let me take it in, let me apply it. And then next week, teach me something new. Let me take it in, let me apply it. I was like going to school. That's what it felt like. And so he quickly, recognizes this and he says, hold on, let's pause a minute. I think it's more valuable for us in this session to talk about how you can get the most out of me. And so at that point, the whole conversation, like it turned on its head. It was me having agency in myself and really wanting to say, what am I in this for? What am I trying to achieve here? Where am I at fault? And so to turn this conversation into that, like, yeah, obviously you're hiring the agent to do a service, right? But if you don't look at the role that you play in that, then down the road, if the experience isn't what you were hoping for, I'm willing to bet that it's somewhere along the line, there was something that you didn't do that could have helped rectify whatever the problem ultimately became, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what we're saying. So the third thing, again, the role that the player plays. So just to summarize, we have communication is a two-way street. The player certainly needs to take the initiative and communicate as well, not just the agent. The player has to take an interest in their career. And then the third thing is the player needs to be honest, right? If the player is frustrated by something that is going on, he needs to articulate that frustration. If the player or the parent has a question, don't sit with it. Call the agent on the phone, ask the question. Do not make assumptions that certain things are happening for certain reasons. Pick up the phone and work through it with your agent. I think too often there is this unspoken expectation that agents are mind readers or that players are mind readers, because it also, again, it's a two-way street. I think agents also need to be honest, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. But how important do you think the honesty is from a player's perspective as far as building a quality relationship with your agent? Like, where's honesty in that?
Yeah, so I think honesty plays such a crucial role in one, understanding what are the priorities of the person that I represent? Right? What are they trying to achieve in their career? Are you a player who just wants to maximize profits and sign for as much money as possible? Or are you a player who's like, actually, I really want to play with this organization and I want to be playing this position? Like, you have to be honest about it and not just think, oh, well, let me tell my agent what he wants to hear. I know he probably wants to hear that, like, oh yeah, I want to sign wherever and sign for as much money as possible. And so they just go along with it. It's like, you got to be honest about what it is that you want, what you want to achieve. When you're struggling, right? Are you going through something right now? All of those things, like, yeah, you should have a relationship with your agent in the best case scenario where you can have those honest conversations. And it's only going to elevate your agent because he's going to be able to meet you better with what's currently going on for you and like where he can fill in the gaps for you.
Well, and what I think it'll ultimately lead to is this the right agent for you, right? If you're, again, making assumptions, not communicating, not taking an interest in your career, you may be represented by the wrong agent and not even know it. And you may not even figure it out until it's too late, right? And so all of these things that we're recommending that you, the family, and the player do is to really strengthen the relationship. But also, if for some reason this is not the agent that you should be with, or maybe if you're meeting with agents, this is not the agent that I want to sign with, those things will become obvious earlier, right? So this is a sense like a key to figuring out, all right, what is that perfect relationship that I'm searching for?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now the other side of this, I guess, is now the role that the agent plays. What's the very first thing that everybody says when it's like, hey, what are you looking for in an agent? What's the thing that every player says?
Your agent needs to know what they're doing. Yeah. They need to have experience in all aspects of the game. They need to, whatever the player is going to go through in their career, they need to have some experience going through it with previous players so they can best navigate that situation.
Well, so yeah, the agent needs to be an expert, right?
Without a doubt.
I mean, that is fundamentally what is required to do what we do.
Yeah.
As far as the question goes, I know I mentioned those 7 questions that we give to these players. Those questions related to this are, this is why we brought it up earlier. Like, which agent in the company would I be working for? Am I working with the guy who has the experience? Or am I working with the guy who, he's got a year in the business and And by the way, again, it's okay if you're working daily with the guy who's got a year in the business, because the reason what maybe you're choosing to work with him one-on-one is because he played professional baseball. We talk about the game. That's totally fine. But you also need to have a relationship with the other people that are going to be the experts in negotiating your career, or negotiating your contract rather, because again, they're the ones that they should be basing what they're doing off of you and what it is that you want.
They're the ones speaking on your behalf to the teams that you play for.
Right.
So, they need to have an understanding of who you are as a person, what your priorities are, what your needs are, what are you trying to achieve in this game? Like they need to know you on a personal level at some point, I would think, in the best case scenario.
Yeah, they're representing you in all the ways that word means, right?
Yeah.
Like they are, when the team is talking to the agent, that agent is saying something about who you are, how you think, what you value. And so whatever is coming out of his mouth is certainly coloring or forming an opinion of you, the player, and you, the family, based on that individual. So if you're not taking an interest in it, if you're not being honest with your agent, like all these things are going into this next component. Another question that also kind of, lends itself to figuring out, how experienced your agent is, when was the last time you went to an arbitration hearing, right?
Mm-hmm.
What were the circumstances of it? A few more. When was the last time your company was fired by a player, and what were the circumstances, right? I think the reason why I believe that question is so impactful and so powerful is, and trust me, like I've been in many meetings with families and players over the years, talking to them about Aligned and our services and how we're different and unique and all these different things. And it is very easy for that conversation to be one-sided, where the family's saying, tell us about yourself, what's your experience, etc. And so it's easy to kind of be in this offensive position as an agent and like, yeah, let me tell you what's going on. The minute you ask an agent, well, when was the last time you were fired and what were the circumstances? It immediately kind of flips the energy on its head. And it puts the agent on some level like, oh, back's against the wall. What's my answer to this? And it may make an agent uncomfortable because that agent is just so stuck in this like sales pitch that it really causes them to pull themselves out of it and give an honest answer. So my belief, and the reason why this is an important question, is a family is going to figure out pretty quickly if that agent, what their answer is true, or if you just didn't buy it and this guy's full on selling. That's why that to me is such a valuable question. So number one, the role of an agent, be an expert. Number two, serve without personal agenda. What does that mean to you?
An agent needs to be a fiduciary, right? We need to be doing what's best for the player and meeting their needs, regardless of what's best for us, right? You used an analogy earlier and I liked it. It was like, if I'm a doctor and I get commission on surgeries, but you don't need a surgery and I'm telling you to get the surgery, like,
are you actually
I'm not working in your best interest.
Right.
Right. So agents need to be working from that perspective at all times, and putting the player's needs above their own and, what they want to achieve. And again, to use what I was talking about earlier, like if a player wants to sign with one particular team for less money and an agent's talking him into no, sign for more money, there's a disconnect, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not looking, if I'm your agent, I'm telling you, no, we have better opportunities elsewhere. Just like do what I say, but that's not what you want. Well, who am I looking out for? I'm looking out for myself.
Well, so I think this is an important story to tell really briefly for everybody listening, because I think it articulates kind of what you're saying and this point really well. So I believe that a lot of agents out there want to criticize. They almost like cast this wide net on just other agents in general, right? If you represent players one way, you want to look at some other agent, and it doesn't even matter the job that they've done. That agent, what comes out of his mouth is that guy sucks. That deal sucks. They suck. They aren't like us. And this is why I believe that so many players, when they hear agents, it's like, you can't even believe anything they say. Cause like no other agent's ever done a good job.
Mm-hmm.
No other agent's ever done what we've done. The reality is that I believe all of these agents are in this business because they want to help players. I do believe that. Now, where they take it from there is totally different. And the complaint that I've often had is not what's wrong with the agent. It's what's wrong with the business that agents live in. What's wrong with the industry that agents live in? Because I believe it's the business that needs to change. The business takes people who otherwise would want to work on behalf of players, and it absolutely sucks their life out of them. And what I mean by that is, so you have an agent who goes to work at a company and he's like, I want to help players. I was a player myself. This was me. I want to do everything I can for players. I want to serve them. And very quickly you realize at a big agency or just, I say big, but it could just be an agency in general. At an agency, you realize, oh, wait a second, this is a business. And my boss is on me every day about, I need to go get more clients. And I need to go get more clients because this business needs to survive. And we need to continue to represent good players so we can keep getting good players, right? It's cyclical. I need to get better players so we can keep representing better players. And so personally, I saw this year over year. And it's funny because other agents see it too, because they stop me and we have conversations about it. And so we are not the only ones saying this. We're the only ones saying it publicly. Everyone else likes to say it privately. So these agents get in the business and, the cycle is happening. And so it starts to change the mindset of the agent. Now it's, okay, shoot, I need to sign more players. So how do I sign more players? I need to tell them what they want to hear. Oh, okay, so I'll just keep telling them what they want to hear. And so now you're representing players actually not working in their best interests, working in the agency's best interests, right? And what that looks like in real time is, and I'm not going to name the names, but, prominent player in the big leagues who doesn't know that his team makes an offer, finds out later after signing with another team that the team he really wanted to play for made an offer and decides to fire the agent because of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those situations happen all the time. And I don't believe it was the agent when they got into the business that just down the road had this view of I can't wait to screw these guys over. No, I think it was all about they're making decisions and rationalizing them because, well, what am I supposed to do? I'm loyal to the agency, right?
Yep.
That happens all the time. So to use the doctor analogy, like you said, I think that's a real one. And to be honest with you, and this is kind of going behind the scenes a little bit, there is actually a term in behavioral economics that is the principal agent problem, right? And what that term basically means is, you, the player, are the principal. You hire an agent to do a job. That agent has conversations on your behalf, receives information, takes the information, gives it to you differently, and doesn't work in your best interest, works in theirs. It's literally called the principal agent problem for a reason, right?
Yeah. So studying in economics. So if you believe it doesn't exist, it obviously
it exists. So I think part of you as a player actually creating a better relationship with your agent and creating a relationship or an agency bond that does work doesn't come from an unwillingness to do this. It comes from the opposite. It becomes from an awareness of all this stuff, right? You being able to manage the meetings with these agencies, you being able to manage your own relationship with your agent, fully understanding these things exist, and you being in a much better position to kind of manage and analyze stuff on your own. I think the biggest mistake that players make is they give up their agency. And I don't mean agency like baseball agency. I mean their own personal agency, their ability to make decisions for themselves. Hey, that's what my agent's for. He's going to tell me when I should sign, right? So the story I want to talk about really briefly is Austin Riley, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I've told this story before, so I apologize to anybody if it's redundant. But so the Atlanta Braves obviously at one point approached us about a multi-year contract, right? They started at $100 million. We turned it down. We ended up signing a one-year deal. Very shortly thereafter, it turns into them making an offer at $167 million. And obviously the job of the agent at that point is I need to walk my guy through this whole process, right? I need to educate him because he needs to be so comfortable with saying yes or no at some point that I don't want that decision to be, I guess, or I'm not sure. It needs to be yes or no. And you are fully committed, because if it's no and you turn down hundreds of millions of dollars, you've got to be really strong mentally not to second guess that decision if you start to struggle shortly thereafter, right?
Yeah.
We've all seen players who have done that. And so obviously this process takes, a few months to kind of develop. We eventually get to a place where the offer on the table, essentially take it or leave it, was 212. Now, Austin wasn't a free agent. He was 3 years from free agency, so he was first-time arbitration eligible. So really the calculus at that point was, all right, look, we know guys are coming behind us guys are in front of us who are going to set the market very soon in the future. So obviously, Austin, part of this analysis is, how important is it for you to be an Atlanta Brave, number one, right? Number two, the Atlanta Braves have policies. They don't do no trade clauses, right? They don't do incentives. There's all these different things they don't do. So you're essentially accepting, if you want to sign this deal because you want to be an Atlanta Brave, that there is the likelihood that you could be traded, maybe not right away, but in the future at some point towards the tail end of that contract. You have to be aware of it, right? The other component to this is, all right, you obviously need to stay healthy and you need to continue to develop. But if you do all those things, if you turn this down and you keep developing, you stay healthy, you're going to sign for more money than this. Like, it's going to happen, right? However, if you want to be an Atlanta Brave, here's your opportunity, because if we turn this down, it's not that the team is going to trade you right away, right? They're probably going to keep you here. But, the GM of the Braves, and he talks about this publicly, like, he's never done a deal like this. So I don't expect that if we turn this down, like, miraculously in a month, 6 months, a year, this number is going to multiply twofold, right? So here's your opportunity. What do you want to do? And so part of the analysis for us was, we want to show you all of these comparable comps. What's a good deal? What's a bad deal? What's a fair deal? And so we essentially got to a place where, okay, we got to a deal where we understood the risk. It put money in his pocket where he felt like it was life-changing. And I wanted to make sure that he was making a rational decision based on all the facts. And so he wrestled with it for quite a while, right? And I talked about this in the podcast interview with Tony Clark, one of the things that I loved about Austin is he was really invested in this idea of, like, how does this contract, or how will this contract affect the players coming behind me? Because I would never want anybody to be harmed by this contract. And thankfully, this contract would never have done that. But the fact that he asked that question, like, meant a lot, right? This guy it's in what Tony says in my podcast. And if you haven't listened, you should go listen to it. He basically is like, look, it says something about Austin as a person and this character. So Austin is struggling with this decision, right? And I could tell he's struggling with it, and he truly doesn't know how to make it. And so I said, Austin, I want to kind of do this exercise with you. Maybe this is beneficial, maybe it's not, but I think it's valuable. So let's make some assumptions. So let's just say in 3 years, when you are a free agent, that you did perform at this level, if not better, that you have stayed healthy, and that you are a free agent and you are the guy at third base, right, as a free agent. Let's talk about the markets that historically would be in play for a guy like you, right? And started going through them. And I don't need to name names because I don't want to call it the organizations, but went through all the big market clubs. Every year, these are the teams that we see signing these massive contracts. And every time I got to these teams, he's like, yeah, I don't see myself playing there. I don't want to play there. Not interested, right? I'm not a big city guy, right? Austin, from Mississippi, has family in Atlanta. And so he's going through this, and I'm like, he's hearing himself say this. So it's starting to, like, form in his mind. There's one team that he said, I can see myself playing for them. I said, okay, is there anybody else? And he's like, no. I said, so the decision that you need to make is, are you willing to take the risk that all these different things need to happen for you in the off chance that you're going to be able to sign with this one other club? Do you want, like, if you were in Vegas, would you make that bet? And he was like, absolutely not. And when he decided to sign with the Atlanta Braves, it was like you could see this weight was lifted off his shoulders, that he had made the right decision. So the reason I'm telling that story is, as an agent, it would have benefited me more for him to turn that money down. Go turn it down. Go sign a bigger contract, right?
Yep.
Wait till Rafael Devers does what he does. Go sign after him. But if I would have done that, am I actually doing what is best for Austin Riley? And I would argue the answer would have been no. So it's not as simple. And I think these agents love to say when they criticize other agents, good deal, bad deal, whatever it is. Like there have been recent extensions
based
right
on
now.
no context.
No context. And I think what people in this industry oftentimes do is they look at just the total dollars and they say, oh, that's a lot of money. That must have been a good deal. Not necessarily. Like you have to understand the context. And so part of an agent's responsibility is it's much more than turn it down, take the deal. It's what do you want? What's important to you? You're the one that's going to have to actually go out there and do it every day. But I want to make sure that you feel good about this because if you don't, to my earlier point, if you turn this down and you're unsure, the whole time are you second guessing yourself every step of the way, right?
Yeah.
So all to say, making the decision on who to hire as your agent, you may make that decision once. It may be this one phone call you make saying, I want to hire you. But at the end of the day, this is a decision that you need to remake every single day. And, you know, it's a responsibility that I know you share, but I feel every day of continuing to build that relationship with that player over and over and over again. And it never stops. You know, Austin Riley, yeah, he signed to a 10-year deal. Like our work doesn't stop.
Definitely not.
We're in Atlanta right now, right? We're seeing him. Like this is what happens. So, yeah, I think, is there anything else that you have that you think is valuable to share with these people?
I mean, you just covered a lot. You did. When he gets going, guys, it's
good.
It's good. No, I think you pretty much hit on the majority of it. I think the big thing for me with this exercise is really making, like, you want to have awareness about where there's possibilities, to bring up the principal agent problem. Where are those possibilities and how can I be aware of certain things happening that I'm not paying attention? They could happen. So let me be just aware of this. You know, not to say my agent's doing this, but I just want to know if there's something there, right? And like one of the questions that we always have people ask is like, hey, how many players does your agency represent, right? If your agency represents a ton of players and your agent that you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis represents a ton of players, I'm not saying that they are going to do a bad job, but there's a possibility that, hey, maybe they're not going to have the time for you to do what's best for you all the time.
Well, it's right? Really, what's their commitment, right? What are they committed to? Because when you, I want to be, sensitive to, I don't think, I personally believe there's a right number of right number of players that an agency should represent. And we actually have that number specifically. And I think it's crazy that agencies don't. But yeah, I mean, if you're committed to doing what's best for your players and adding value to their life, well, it's like, how many friends can you have? Unlimited? Are you a phenomenal friend to unlimited number of people? No. Well, why is that? Well, because it takes time and effort. Well, if it takes time and effort with your friends, don't you think it takes time and effort with your client? Of course it does. Right?
Yeah.
So, I guess as a summary for these quick questions, or for these questions, if everybody wants to know, and then we'll wrap up, it's, so how many clients does your firm represent in total? How many players does your firm typically represent in the draft each year? Does your company have a target number of clients that you're aiming to achieve in representing? In other words, is there an ideal number of clients you believe you can represent effectively? Third, which agent in the company would be negotiating on my behalf? Fourth, do you handle your arbitration cases in-house or do you have an outside law firm? 5, when was the last time you've gone to an arbitration hearing? 6, what was the last time your company was fired by a player and what were the circumstances? And then 7, what's the most difficult decision you've had to deal with in this industry and how did you solve the problem? Those 7 questions, I feel like, they're not the only questions you should ask, but those are a pretty good kind of baseline for you as a family really learning about what this agency and this agent in particular is about. So, buddy, I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, it was great.
This was fun. We'll do it
Talking
again.
shop.
Just talking shop. We do it every day anyways.
All right, bro. All right.